Out of Breath Me is back to talk about human capital. I'm starting work on an article for universities and colleges for the higher education world. I kind of think AI is eating the lunch of the universities. So right now, universities are facing two major uphill battles. The first is Trump's policies with international students. Most of those folks, pretty much all of those folks, are paying full tuition price to come study in the US. And so you start to take that away. That's a major issue for the bottom line. That'll probably abate at the end of this term, 2028. That's still a couple years away, which is not very comfortable. All right, if you try losing a big chunk of your money for a couple years, see how comfortable that is. The second one is obviously AI, the democratization of information. It just begs the question, what are we educating folks for? I think the answer most folks in higher education are coming to is just being fully human, fully developed human, somebody who's pushed themselves, their minds, perhaps also their bodies to certain limits, right, to grow. Certain amount is definitely necessary. It's like when people ask me, because I appeared to not work in the vicinity of any of my degrees for several years, even though I have been in my own mind. Do you regret paying all that money for education? Definitely not. That is me. Who am I as an uneducated person? I mean, I don't know. That was like me at 18. So, yeah, it's like, do you regret who you are? No, not really. My point being, I think that you're probably going to need to pivot toward experiential education. Just because all of a sudden ChatGPT is pumping out information like it's a professor. And like they say, it's the dumbest it'll ever be. So, what does it mean to be fully human? Or what does it look like to scale humanity across the population? To a certain degree, in my mind, definitely, it's to make people fairly or thoroughly aware of their global context. We're humans on planet Earth. You can become more human by understanding the totality of planet Earth. And so you pair that with the same stuff we've been doing in education, growing minds, teaching people to think, right? Teaching people to have conversations, to talk to each other. It's like basic things, non-verbals, verbals. You can articulate ideas, etc. So I don't see you're still gonna have to bang your head against the wall reading classic literature, figuring out engineering formulas, the surface area of a screw, all that. But it's just that universities are increasingly losing their monopoly on that information. And so the obvious pivot in my mind, is graduating people with a fairly thorough knowledge of the world. That's a tall task. There's a reason we haven't done it yet. A lot of the reasons, the technical reasons, the Wi-Fi, the housing, the infrastructure, aren't really issues anymore, and they haven't been only for the last couple years. COVID and then Starlink. It's like we're functional. It's culturally appropriate to have Zoom meetings. All that good stuff. So building out physical travel platforms and putting your already world-class university programming on top of them is the next move. And so that seems straightforward to me. I don't know that there's a single university president or trustee, board member that feels the same way or is thinking along these lines. There's Minerva, I think it's a university they call themselves. has put together a global experiential learning program. You do like maybe it's 6 cities or 8 cities, kind of a different one every semester, 6 to 8 cities around the world. You're kind of all in the same building. To my recent understanding, I haven't checked up on them recently, but they're doing everything remotely, even though they're all in the same place. And so, like, I think they were way better at Zoom before Zoom was a thing. But you're just on these remote platforms in the same place, taking your classes, and then the experiential education. In Shanghai, I think they're based out of San Francisco, and then I kind of forget where the other cities are, but they're around the continents. So they're doing stuff like this, but no major university to that degree is doing the same thing. And so if you're already a brick and mortar institution, say in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard is, or New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is, you're obviously not going to move those castle looking structures that make those cities so beautiful. What you can do fairly inexpensively is build a physical travel platform. And that is a series of vehicles, whether that's boats, planes. I'm thinking bus build-outs, RV build-outs. You're shipping students around each continent. You've already got relationships around all of the continents. You just set up these cross-continental platforms where you've got a fairly sturdy group of connections. You've got good government relations. You're taking classes. You're doing community engagement, whether that be parties, whether that be service projects, like literally whatever it is that will get your students to engage with the local communities, the cultures, subcultures in different countries across the many countries on a continent. So you set up these routes, and then so if I'm a student, maybe I've got 1 or 2 summers free. Usually you're going to do an internship one summer. That's a summer route. That kind of makes a lot of sense, especially when you throw remote work and remote internships on these platforms. But since you own the platform, a week, a weekend, a month, you've already got the capacity to do remote learning, right? And so if somebody's not in a particular class, what really counts is the university's policies that creates the flexibility. It's like, okay, so-and-so is going to be on this trip this week. They can turn in their work remotely. They can attend lectures remotely, and then they can jump back into their other classes. So you see these platforms don't need to be used only during the summers. And so with the rise of AI and the pivot away from international students paying full price, I think this is where you start to pivot toward experiential education, graduating folks with a fairly thorough knowledge of more continents than they know currently. The economics of this, that's the scary part, right? That's the only reason I've heard from folks in international education departments that I've been talking to. It's like, it hasn't made sense. We don't really know how to do it. The economics, it sounds expensive. It doesn't really need to be that expensive. RAGBRAI, something I think of. RAGBRAI is the Des Moines, Iowa Register. That's the newspaper. The Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. So it's this gigantic bike ride. Maybe 40,000 plus people attend it every year. They're cycling across the state of Iowa. So they've got parties, they've got events. You're going through, 40,000 people are going through towns of like several hundred to 10,000. So I mean, I don't know what Des Moines is when they go through there, but like these are towns that are being dwarfed by the population of the bike ride. My point is that a lot of the folks that come join teams. So that's like a local cycling club. That's folks they've just met, and the teams build out themselves buses. So the buses are very bare bones. Think metal bunk beds. They drill a hole in the floor for the gravity shower. They set up a little propane stove in the back, and they register it as an RV, right? And that costs in the ballpark of what a handful of people can afford for something they don't do very often. And so you're looking at like 5, 10, 20 grand per vehicle. And so if you're a university of any size, you can start to tiptoe into these waters, move in this direction, get the marketing campaigns going, you get your test cases. And so it really, a very low barrier to entry, especially if you're a university of any size. And then from there, you build it up. You find out what your students want, you find out what your staff can handle, you find out how well Starlink works at scale, right? You find out what the buildings and maintenance for a handful of vehicles costs. You just do it, because obviously we'll give you estimates, we'll give you what's worked before, but like anything, once you actually own it, you figure things out for yourself, whether it's home ownership, vehicle ownership, etc. And so that is the easy, low barrier to entry, scalable way to get into building a physical travel platform. Your students are probably going to be pumped. The amount of statistics on like what college kids say, how many of them say they want to travel, are significant. You're going to find out how many of them actually like traveling. Trips in general, especially when they're rigorous, they're not vacation, you're not just sitting on a beach, can be emotionally taxing. When I studied abroad in England at Oxford, that was hard. It was only like 6 months, right? You figure that out for yourself. How are your students going to respond if you're a university in the Midwest versus the Southeast versus the West Coast or New England, right? Your populations are going to respond differently. There's a lot of moving pieces to figure out, and so it's important that the barrier to entry is low. You figure these things out, and you kind of build it over years, not months. That's a good thing, I would argue. That means that Harvard, with its like $56 billion endowment, is probably going to have to move at the same speed as like Huntington, which is my alma mater, or even like a flagship state university with its like 80,000 people or 80,000 students are going to move at a similar speed. And so if you're an early adopter of this technology, of this idea, that's possibly going to allow you to leapfrog places like Harvard. Because if they're a late adopter and your platform is much bigger, many more of your students are graduating with, say, a fairly thorough knowledge of Europe and North America, and then they've got some regional trips here and there peppered throughout their course of study, as well as like there's no reason this would eat your study abroad programs, right? The importance of living somewhere for 3, 6, 9 months is equally valuable. So I'm not suggesting that folks substitute short-term travel for longer-term travel, but this is a great way. You pivot toward experiential education, start teaching humans to be fully human instead of just absorbing knowledge, which it turns out AI is probably going to be better at than us. So you build intelligence, but on top of that, you build humanity. And it's getting windy, so we'll see ya.